All right. Well, hi, Facebook community. My name is Shmee, and I'm the program coordinator for the graduate program of Ecology, Spirituality, and Religion at the California Institute of Integral Studies. I'm so happy to be joined today by two dear collaborators and doctoral students of ESR, Charlie Forbes Jr. and Chantal Noah Forbes. Charlie and Chantal are co-founders of Deepwater Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to building the academic field of religion and ecology through educational film and transformational media programs. They've produced several podcasts and audio essays, all available online, and they curate spaces for other creators and media makers to share their own ecological stories. Our CIIS community may be familiar with previous events made possible by DWI, film screenings of Anote's Ark, Genesis 2.0, Artificial, and other community discussions such as Indigenous storytelling in film as a new form of subtle activism. Their work extends far beyond our academic community, and from my perspective, our collective redirection towards virtual events is supporting their aim to use media as a platform to explore the interrelationship between humans, their respective mediums of faith, and the more than human Earth community. We come together today with excitement for the upcoming online panel of Renewal of Genesis 1. And so without further ado, welcome Charlie and Chantal.
Thank you, Shmee.
Hey there. Thanks for having us.
So happy to be here with you. So on your website for Deepwater Initiative, you mentioned that your organization is inspired by the ecological importance of water as an all-pervasive element that sustains life on this planet. I love the deepening and the intention behind the name Deepwater Initiative, and I'm just curious how that is a part of your story, your background with ESR as students, and also your experiences in your personal faith traditions and how that comes together to create DWI.
Well, do you want to jump off or you want me to take this one?
Well, I'll just start by saying that both Charlie and I have a very strong relationship to water as an element, to rivers, to oceans, and we're very curious and interested in how water has played out through different religions and cultures' mythology, and how water is an element that sort of really inspires practical spiritual practice. And both of us come from different backgrounds actually in the agricultural sector, where water played different roles in our careers. And I came from South Africa, where I moved into agriculture as a communications specialist and ended up being exposed to a lot of corporate agriculture in Africa, Asia, and in America, and then also the development world of small-scale agriculture. And what really struck me from that time was how farmers were actually deeply religious. Most farmers that I met, and it didn't matter which continent you were on and whether it was a small-scale farmer or a large-scale farmer, and that religious view really enforced a lot of their engagement with the natural world, whether that was a view that they still included praying for the spirits for rain to come every year, or if it was a view that we as the humans should dominate nature and should learn how to control nature through things like GMO technology and general advancement of agricultural technology. So what really dawned on me is that if we really want to change the way we feed ourselves and the way we engage in our environment through agriculture, we need to address the spiritual, philosophical, and cultural elements of people's mindsets and their belief systems, and not just tackle the practical aspects of their environmental practices. And so that's really what led me to ESR, because it was the only place that I found after doing an extensive search on the internet that brought those things together, the philosophy, the religion, and the ecological humanities. And it was also the only program. I'd already done my master's degree, so I was looking for a PhD. And I didn't find too many programs that could allow me to do a PhD with combining these particular disciplines. So yeah, California was my choice because of this program.
Well, for me, I think I'll maybe address a couple of things in succession here. As far as the name deep water, I do hesitate from defining the meaning of it very specifically, because I think number one, I'm not so sure you can really do that. I have my own ideas theologically what that means. I think we have framed the Deepwater Initiative as being inspired about the significance of water as found in the Torah. This is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. And that this comes from our own spiritual path and our own personal inquiry into our own tradition. But is very much comes out of the waters of the deep in Genesis 1. And I think, like any element, water is a very clear example of balance, as far as we require it to live, but also too much of it can kill us. And so it's very much playing with this balance that we need to find. I've been reading a book this past week, actually, called We Are the Weather. And the author, Jonathan Foer, he makes this statement, we are the ark and we are the flood. And so he's playing with this metaphor of water as far as our own, the way in which we can cause our own destruction, but we can also be our own salvation. So that's more of where a lot of the meaning is coming out of, at least the intention behind the formation of the nonprofit. As far as my own background with ESR, I'm a little bit different than Chantal. I had more of a hardcore biology background, and I think one of the things, and I'll generalize here, but I just sort of found that I didn't see study of the hardcore sciences really changing people's hearts and minds, or changing their belief systems. One of my ways into ESR, actually, is I read a book called Spiritual Ecology, The Cry of the Earth. It was a collection of essays that was put together by Lewin Vaughan Lee, but it had Mary Evelyn Tucker and Brian Swim, and they all contributed to the book. And I just really found it amazing to see all of these different people from different backgrounds coming together to talk about our ecological crisis. So that was kind of my way into ESR. And yeah, so here we are today. And now I'm just starting my PhD. So Chantal is kind of well on her way. So we're in different spots, but yeah, and throughout my degree was exploring the significance of water, both quite literally, like in terms of ocean health, but also very much spiritually, what that means for us, as far as our treatment of water, and how our theological framing of it can help shift our physical interaction with it. So, yeah.
Thank you both so much. I really see how your exemplary, voices for ecology, spirituality, and religion, both in how you approach that conversation from unique perspectives that are kind of honed through your life experiences and other study, and also how you're able to work together in that conversation to amplify a message around ecological health and our deeper relationship to Earth, as Earth, some might say. So you've touched into that a little bit, and I'm curious, since, you know, Chantal, you speak a little bit in your doctoral work around like these primal instinctive ways of being in relationship with more than human and other humans. And Charlie, in your work, you look a lot at ancient texts that are kind of foundational to a lot of modern spiritual practices. Both of those like deeper instinctual or deeper cultural groundings may not have emerged at times when humans faced as great of an ecological crisis as we do today. So ESR seems as, you know, not only a reflection on the past and kind of what has brought us to where we are, but it also engenders a response to what's happening presently. Can you speak a little bit more on the function of ESR in the crises that we face today?
Well, I think, first of all, maybe I'll premise this by saying one of, in its name, California Institute of Integral Studies, it's pretty clear that a lot of what we do is integral. So it reaches across disciplines. And more specifically, ESR is really working to bring together disciplines like the environmental humanities with religious studies and philosophy. It's really important to have interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary discussions these days, because there are the challenges that we're facing are really complex, and we really need to work on having those types of discussions. Sorry, maybe if you could ask me.
Well, why ESR within the ecological crisis? Like what relevance does ESR have to this moment?
Well, in particular, bringing together and exploring these questions, more of the transdisciplinary questions. Yeah,
I mean, one thing that is really clear to us as students in ESR is we're in the department because most people who come to the department realize that technology can't solve all our problems. We've also realized that we're moving beyond a phase in history of monolithic culture, which was perpetuated through, you know, empires and colonization. And we're moving into a new phase of appreciation for diversity. Now, what becomes really challenging, I think, in that is there are many different systems of belief and different cultural systems that are impacting the environment in different ways. And so as students, I think we are called to bring different perspectives to the table. So you mentioned, you know, sort of my and Charlie's work. Both of us are looking at how human behavior is shaped and formed through a variety of belief systems, although I am looking at a particular approach to the environment and between humans and animals in a Paleolithic era. And Charlie's really looking at a culture that emerged out of the Neolithic era and was a post-agricultural culture. And I think it's important to look at all those different things in order to reframe our current moment, and to not only say, like, how can we compost and recycle better, but to say, how do we go about recreating communities, and what features and characteristics can we take from past mythology in order, you know, to reframe that. So I think a space like ESR is really a space that allows you to hold that conversation. Neither of us, we knew what the problem was, in the sense that we knew that part of the problem was that society wasn't having this conversation. And we didn't know ourselves how to have it. But in going through our coursework, particularly at ESR, and being able to take courses across departments. So You know, we've taken courses with women's spirituality, and we've taken courses with PCC and the anthropology department that equipped us with a language to start to have our own conversations with our peers, and then, you know, amongst each other in the development of the nonprofit, and then of course with ourselves about our own work.
Yeah, and I would add, as far as you're bringing up Chantal's work and my work, one of the things that we're learning to do as well in ESR is to retrieve some of these traditions that we believe to be of value of us moving forward, and working to recontextualize them. So it's not so much that, like, when we look back and in Chantal's work or certain texts that I'm looking at, it's not so much that that they had an awareness of an ecological crisis, but there is embedded within these traditions a type of ecological consciousness and a type of ecological awareness that has either been phased out, deliberately covered up, or just sort of for various reasons faded away. And for us, it's about going back, retrieving what we see to be beneficial for us moving forward, and working to reframe them. And that's very much about what we're doing in ESR, and really learning about that in the context of our own history as humans. So yeah.
And how do you see the role of story and transformational media, film? How do you see the role of that in this mission?
Well, one of our first classes that we took with our chair, Elizabeth Allison, was Ecology in a Time of Planetary Crisis. And we spent a lot of time going through a lot of data and going through a lot of facts and information, and talking about sort of, you know, how climate change has been presented, how environmental crises get presented to the world, how denial sets in. And what was very clear to the class was that story is a pivotal part of any narrative that's presented, whether it's the narrative that climate change doesn't exist, or whether it's the narrative that we have 20 more years left on the planet, and that it's very important to reach people through the medium of story for them to relate to what you're saying. So what we've really found is that a lot of people just can't relate to the discussion for a variety of reasons. It's either too abstract or too data-driven, or they don't know how to relate to discussions about theology and religion, because they don't necessarily spend much time themselves thinking about how their ancestors' belief systems have actually informed their culture. So when you present a story to them, particularly we found film to be a very successful medium, they have characters in that story to connect with, and those characters undergo a journey and go through very real emotional occurrences that any human being should be able to recognize. And so when you use story as a medium to hold this type of discussion, I think you're giving people a way to engage in the discussion as truly humans. So you strip away the political aspects and a lot of the aspects that make these subjects often very divisive, and you try to just relate person to person, and I think a film like A Noah's Ark was a very good example of that, where you had these two central characters, where everyone who, we screened that film to 4 different audiences of various ages and coming from totally different backgrounds, and everyone felt really inspired by the individual characters. and said that for the first time they felt what it was like, what it might be like to live on an island that's flooding or disappearing, where in the past they would read a news article and they wouldn't really know what to make of it because they can't see themselves in that situation. So I think contextuality is really a lot of what media is about, and a lot of what true transformative media should be about.
And relationality.
Yeah.
Like, I feel that, I won't go off on a tangent, but in the sense that we really feel that technology and film and media can be used really positively. I mean, that's in essence what we mean by transformative media, is using it as a tool to help better ourselves. And I'm just putting that really simply. And what Chantel's talking about is we try to find these films where you can, where they're narratives of people that you can find some sort of a relationship with, even though it's through film, and it's through that relationality that you go about feeling some sort of emotive connection and internalizing the story in a way that helps you to grow and helps you to change, and helps you to see the world differently and feel motivated to go out there and do some positive things in the world. So that's really what we've been aiming to do in our work with film. And yeah, it's been great so far.
Well, and I just think for ESR specifically, at the California Institute, as a doctoral student, I've come to realize that a lot more doctoral students are finding the need to use visuals, art, performance, and media to support their message, because text is lacking in that sort of, it doesn't create a picture, so to speak. So I think that's really interesting, is that it seems to me that media is becoming more of a necessary tool within academia overall.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for covering that ground. It's, and film is a little different, even though, virtual panels are still on a screen and you're kind of engaging in a similar way. But I want to pivot a little bit to the conversations that you've curated, either around media or, specifically our upcoming panel on Genesis 1.
Yeah, so, it's been a really interesting experience for us during this time of COVID, in the sense that we did a number of film screenings before at CIS and other places, physical screenings. And of course, the first thing you notice is it's difficult to get people's attention to come to an event. And once they're there, people engage really well, but it's difficult to get them there. What was nice about that is you could really sit in a circle after the film and have a discussion. And from the get-go, we've been blown away by people's responses to what the documentaries that we've shown them. And a lot of the documentaries are really story-driven, about people in remote parts of the world, often indigenous people, because these are really the people where environmental injustices and ecological crises are taking place, and they're the ones being affected by this. So what we noticed, though, when we went online, strangely enough, is of course we missed that person-to-person contact, but it was much easier to get people to attend an event. And at the same time, we were still able to hold a circle and to hold a conversation. And we recently hosted a film by an Indigenous filmmaker, and we had a professor curate the discussion. And we were 15 or 20 people in the discussion. And there was a lot of personal sharing of what the film brought up for people. So what was nice about that experience is people watched the film the week before in their own time and at leisure, and they had time to think about the film. And then we got onto this communal Zoom, and they were really ready to share. And they were really ready to comment and to bring their input from their various careers or positions. You know, a lot of different things came up. We had a lot of educators actually join the panel discussion, and they spoke a lot about how the film made them think about how they can include media in their own work and what type of media to include, and how to reach their own students in a different way. So yeah, that's, I think, been really interesting. And then lastly, one of the things that really surprised us recently is we've been working with a study abroad program. One of the students that works in the anthropology department has been curating the climate change program that happens annually. And these students start off with a week in San Francisco where they sort of go to classes all about how climate change is taking place across the globe. And then they travel to 4 or 5 different countries to see how people are impacted. And these are students that are going to Ivy League schools. So they're not necessarily always exposed to, you know, some of the bottom end. Well, let's just say they haven't necessarily been exposed to a lot of catastrophe per se on an environmental level in their own lives. And their responses really surprised us. We've done 3 screenings, I think, with them, and we've actually used the same film. And every time it's a different audience.
Each year, yeah.
Each year, and each one in sharing afterwards, and we had 30 odd students last time, so it took quite a while. They all reflected on what the film brought up for them from their upbringing, what it brought up for them about their privilege, what it brought up for them about the degree they'd chosen to study and why they were in this program, and what they hope to engage with more going forward. So that's something that we would really like to engage in more, is to find a way to work with that age group. You know, so undergraduate students who are making a lot of decisions about their future at that time in their life. And we can really see how that could be a positive form of outreach.
And I think just to jump on what Chantal was saying, we're just trying to do the best we can right now with the situation, and people have seemed to be really responsive to these online formats. I know Zoom fatigue we're all learning, is becoming a really real thing. But as far as the panel is concerned, the Genesis 1 panel, the impetus out of it actually came from the idea of trying to bring a Jewish voice to the discussion of Genesis 1. I think throughout my studies and throughout my master's in ESR, I really came to realize there's the field in general is dominated by a Christian voice. My whole thinking was to try and bring a lot of so there's going to be 5 people on the panel, various professors and scholars, theologians, and Dr. Catherine Keller, Rabbi Ellen Bernstein, Dr. Norman Habel, Dr. David Kishik, and Rabbi David Seidenberg. Really in putting together the panel, the whole idea was just to have these thinkers who bring an alternative way of thinking about Genesis 1. And part of it is just people that I have found really their work really interesting. So it is sort of born out of who I've been influenced by. Catherine Keller's written a really awesome book, Face of the Deep. And so there's a link with Deep Water there. Ellen Bernstein, she's doing really cool stuff. She's writing theologically and philosophically, but is also putting together really practical tools. She's written an ecological Passover Haggadah. So what she's doing is taking existing ritual and essentially saying that we can generate an ecological awareness out of existing ritual. So not to go on, but it's really cool. David Kishik wrote a really amazing book, the Book of Shem. It's kind of a really philosophical, thought-provoking meditation on Genesis 1 to 11. So it's more, you know, the formation of this field that is ecology, spirituality, and religion is somewhat, we use Lynn White's article, The Historical Roots of Our Ecological Crisis. We sort of use that as a marker, whether or not you want to attribute the field or the formation of the field to his article. I think is up for debate. It certainly generated a lot of discussion, but he talks about Genesis 1 and our ideas about dominion essentially being one of the major causes of the environmental crisis. So there's also that. There's recognizing that Genesis 1 is a foundational text in the field of ecology, spirituality, and religion, and saying, let's maybe just have a discussion about bringing some alternative voices and helping to just keep the conversation going. And there are people out there that are doing really incredible, amazing work. And I think in this virtual format, just having the ability to bring them all together, we're just taking advantage of the situation and using it to generate positive conversations. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we were talking about is how can we continue to foster community? And we also recognize that a lot of film festivals have gone online, so we didn't want to do more of the same thing for the fall. And again, what we realized is that it's a lot easier for us to get these people in the same room when they don't have to travel somewhere. And Charlie had a really quick and positive response from the panelists that were invited, partly also because I think they're really interested in hearing each other's perspectives. And so the whole idea to do an online panel, I think, is very much born out of the moment and the present situation we find ourselves in. But we would want to do this in any way. I'm just not so sure we would have been able to. And so, you know, there's two other aspects I want to mention about what's interesting about the panelists is, so Rabbi David Seidenberg, his book, Kabbalah and Ecology, really focuses on how to read Genesis 1 from a more than human perspective. So he's really taking it beyond the human to earth interaction or the human to human interaction and taking it to include the phrase Tselem Elohim, or in the image of God, to be all of creation as being in the image of God. And so that's something that's really important to me, to bring that perspective to the dialogue, to bring other species into the dialogue. And then Dr. Norman Habel, who's actually based in Australia, and many decades ago wrote the Earth, was engaged in the Earth
Bible
Project. Yeah. He's actually working with a lot now in his 80s. We're surprised at how active some scholars can be into such a late age, but he's really working with what Genesis 1 means for Aboriginal peoples in Australia. And so again, that's very important for me to bring in an Indigenous perspective and approach. So yeah, we're really excited to see different voices on the same text come together, and to see how that potentially inspires other students at ESR in their own interpretive work.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for speaking to all of this. It really is so inspiring to hear about, yeah, your path with this work, and how it is regenerative in this time. It seems like we have so much to look forward to on September 14th with the Genesis 1 panel. I also wish that we could go on and down many tangents, but it'll be very exciting to hear from these leaders, scholars, and theologians themselves. Is there anything, any question that you've been holding, or anything you're particularly looking forward to as these voices come together? Maybe mentioning our esteemed moderator, Jake Sherman, and maybe how you see his role and his perspective kind of as a container maybe for this panel.
Well, I think in general, Jake has been formative to our education at CIS. He is, although he would never say it because he's not a formal trained theologian, he is quite an accomplished philosopher. But we've, throughout our time, taken various courses with him on Christian mysticism, Christianity and ecology, and he has really helped us. I talked about this mode of retrieval that we use as a methodology in ESR, but he's really helped us to go back and look at within the Christian tradition, which is where he does a lot of his teaching, really retrieving some really beautiful practices, thought frameworks, and an ecological consciousness that's very much a part of the tradition and bringing it forward. So I do think that having him moderate, he brings a lot to the table, because I think he's got a whole library in his head, number one. And I'll be interested to see how he engages with the various panelists and what they have to say. I don't know exactly what every single panelist is going to be discussing exactly in their talk, but certainly having Jake moderate, he's just going to help bring it all together for everybody in a way that I think we will all benefit from. So yeah.
One thing that struck us throughout our education, and as Charlie said, we took a lot of Jake's classes, is he has a real passion for cultural philosophy and how theology is intertwined with cultural and social philosophy. And I think he also has a great respect for other religious traditions. And he has a pretty broad knowledge of the Abrahamic traditions in general. So even though he's not an expert in Judaism or Islam, he's very good friends with a lot of scholars in these fields. And it appears to me that he really engages different scholars from different traditions in good dialogue. And so we felt that, Jake actually, he knows some of the people on the panel as well. And it's part of why we picked them, is because he would have referenced them in our classes and really spoken about their work and why they're doing good work. But he himself has thought a lot about Genesis 1, I believe. And I think, for example, that Dr. Catherine Keller has been a great influence in his thinking about Genesis 1. And so him having meditated on it a lot, he'll be able to really pick up on the salient points that the presenters bring forward. And of course, I just think as this panel is a collaboration with the California Institute of Integral Studies and with the ESR, of which Jake is also a professor, it was important for us to have a moderator that represents our educational standpoint and represents the pedagogy that we are sort of putting forward or trying to promote.
Wonderful. Thank you for setting the stage, the virtual platform, speaking to all of this. Well, I just checked the comments and it looks like we don't have any questions from our fan base here in the ESR Facebook page. So maybe we'll take this as an opportunity to offer our gratitude for this opportunity to speak in this way, and to remind folks that they can join the virtual panel on September 14th at 4 p.m. Pacific. They can register on the Deepwater Initiative webpage. There's also a Facebook page for this event. So I'll include all of those links in the comments section, as well as a plug for Deepwater Initiative's SoundCloud page for other original content that you both contribute. So thanks again.
Thank you, Shmee, very much for holding the conversation and for holding the space that you hold at ESR. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I learned so much with you all, so it's really a pleasure of mine. All right.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a joy. All right, we'll see you, I guess, in a month. A month and a day. Yeah, a month and a day. All right, more to come. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.